Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 117th Right and Left Discussion Forum. Before we begin, on behalf of Right and Left Incorporated and our discussion panel, I'd like to offer our condolences to the family and friends of Darlene Kovack, who passed away this week. She was very loved and will be missed. Today our panel is going to discuss issues that are particularly of interest to Ohioans. Particularly, we're going to talk about legislative reapportionment and public school financing. And that our panel today consists of, on my left, Bryan Laubaugh, President of R&B Financial Services. And on his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. On his left is Jerry Ritzman, co-founder of Ritzman Pharmacies. And on his left is Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council. Bryan, let's begin by talking about legislative reapportionment, or when it's done poorly, gerrymandering, or it's specifically the manipulation of legislative boundaries in order to give advantage to one party or group or another. What is your thinking about this?
Well, obviously it's been around for a long time. And
ever since Mr. Gerrymander.
Exactly, ever since they named it after Mr. Gerrymander.
Do you know who it was named after, Bryan?
Well,
his name was Jerry.
His name was Jerry.
It was a politician in Massachusetts, and they did some redistricting. His name was, it was the governor. His last name was Jerry.
Yeah.
They, with a G, they looked at the district, and some guy said, boy,
like
that district looks like a salamander. And the guy said, oh, that looks like a gerrymander. And it stuck.
That's where it came from.
That's where it came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been around for a long time.
Ever since salamanders.
Ever since salamanders, yeah. And affectionately, it's known as redistricting. Obviously, what I think sometimes gets lost in this issue is that what our last president said, elections have consequences. And unfortunately, when whatever side you're on, the losing side always seems to find something wrong with the current rules and legislation that everybody's agreed to, whether you're Republican or Democrat, and then they go off on these issues as far as fairness. They talk about the way voters are suppressed. But I'll be interested in Patty's comments, because Patty serves on our Board of Elections. And that is a bipartisan committee. And everybody understands what the rules are. Everybody understands the processes and procedures that come with an election. And when you come down to redistricting, now it's kind of taken the forefront, because Pennsylvania had some crazy redistricting going on. But you can always point to other areas. You don't hear much about gerrymandering coming out of Illinois, which is probably one of the most gerrymandered states that you can probably point your finger at. And it's been that way for quite some time. And it's our friends on the other side of the issue that have done that to that state. So it happens on both sides of the political argument. Can there be improvements? Yes, there should be. And I think there were some steps taken where a more bipartisan committee has been put in place. But the argument comes in with making sure that the judiciary doesn't start creating laws. Our system of government, the legislature, both houses, they create laws. It's the judiciary that's supposed to enforce those laws and interpret those laws. And what's happening, it seems, is that the judiciary now is taking it upon themselves to almost rewrite laws and make certain laws null and void. So that's going to be an argument. The Supreme Court just turned down a case and sent it back. They're going to have to do some stuff as far as redistricting is concerned in Pennsylvania. But it's not a new issue. And hopefully, we've got some bipartisan support to put together some, more open committees to deal with this particular issue, and I'm sure they'll find a solution. We just hope that in the future, that when this comes up, that everybody agrees to what they agreed to. And I think that's one of the problems, is that, you know, it's what everyone agreed to, and you know, we find ourselves now revisiting it again. So
Yeah. Ron, I know this is a topic that's been keeping you awake at night for years. Share your thoughts.
Well, I think gerrymandering is a very good example of an unbridled quest for power, whether it's Republican or Democrat, fueled by greed, getting in the way of fairness. We don't allow athletes to use steroids because it gives them an unfair advantage. I think this is a good analogy there. Yeah. But big breaking news, you know, the Ohio legislature just approved a plan which will go to the voters in May. Not exactly what the committee wanted with the 7-member commission, but it's going to be it's an advantage. I think the statement was it's all the Republicans would stand for at this point. But it was interesting. I read recently that the present plan was put in place and approved by both parties as a way of achieving some fairness along racial lines, particularly African American. It had unintended consequences by splitting up districts. Summit County has 4 different congressional districts, the representatives of which none of whom live in Summit County. So this is a pretty extreme example. But so that was a kind of an unintended consequence in a way, I think, on that. And I found an article. I didn't get the newspaper yesterday. Our carrier goofed. And I called for a replacement. It never came, but I got it today. And so I was a little surprised that I went on to Facebook last night and said, "Oh, gee whiz, what did the Ohio legislature just do?" And I copied an article from the Atlantic, Senate Resolution 5, and it's been approved now by the House. 3/5 support of the entire legislature. But it gets, if that's not approved in May, then it goes to the 7-member commission.
What is the issue about?
This is about gerrymandering, redistricting. Proposed to require 3/5 support of the entire legislature to pass a map for use over a 10-year period, starting 2020.
This is a recent issue?
Yeah.
This is
just the other day.
Just yesterday.
Oh, really?
Beacon Journal.
It's going to be on the.
Beacon Journal.
Is it going to be on the ballot?
It's going to be on the ballot.
In the
Well,
fall.
they did
Going to be on the ballot.
a few
Yeah.
years back.
No, this is a redo.
Okay. I didn't
Require
know that.
3/5 support of the entire legislature, and this 3/5 support must include 50% of all members of the minority party.
Right.
50%. Maximum number is sets forth a maximum number of counties that can be split. This would affect district compactness. If they can't create maps that follow these rules and get the support, then you'd go a 7-member bipartisan commission. Then they would need support from at least 2 of the minority members for the continue. If this fails, then there's 2 more contingencies. Either the legislature can have another go at creating it, this time only have to secure 1/3 of the minority party's votes, or it can create a map that only lasts for 4 years, has much stricter compactness requirements. That 4-year map would require a simple majority. So
Did you notice my eyes just glaze over?
Ron, if I can interrupt you. This reminds me of the, I get the word of the day, you know, from dictionary.com. The other day it was Byzantine. Unduly complicated.
Unduly complicated.
That's what that is. But anyway,
Well, I
excuse my
think
interruption.
what the extra provisions be, if it doesn't go for the first one, then it gets a little more favorable for the majority parties that goes along. So it's an incentive for the voters to approve it.
But this is something before it would go to the 7-person commission.
Before it would go to the commission.
goes
This
to
is
the
what's going to be
legislature.
voted on for the present split, requiring 50% of all minority party members to agree on the plan. That will be voted on, and this is a constitutional amendment we're talking about.
It is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's pretty interesting. It's breaking news.
Well, I know that
And,
issue 1 that passed in 2015 and was billed as a bipartisan issue.
And it was.
Well, it really wasn't. It was a 7-person commission, 5 of whom were from the majority party and 2 of them are from the minority party. Now, that's hardly bipartisan. That's,
Well, in the half and half.
that's kind of maybe a little bit bipartisan.
A little bit like being a little bit pregnant.
Jerry, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was doing some reading even prior to this announcement of the constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot this fall in Ohio. And there were some amendments to the Voting Rights Act. I don't know which president signed those some years ago, that almost encouraged some gerrymandering,
Yeah.
so that certain groups would be assured seats
representation.
And that's in Ohio. There's 3 or 4 districts in the state of Ohio that are almost locked to go to members of a certain group.
Yeah.
So I don't know how this will
Yeah.
measure up to that, if it'll pass I guess whatever gets passed at the legislative level is going to have to pass the federal elections laws.
true.
And but this does seem like it puts a little pressure on whoever the minority party is to say, well, even if we don't get 100% of what we want, maybe this is the best we're going to do, and because our chances only lessen if we
And that
don't
was the
pass
comments
it.
in
Yeah,
the
so
paper
you
yesterday,
know,
sure.
but you know, it's a difficult issue, because you know, how do you get some type of total representation by just doing things geographically? I guess because geographically, just the course of things kind of sorts out things socioeconomically. Where do people live? What town do they go live in? What towns do they not want to live in? That type of thing. So it's going to be a fluid issue, very difficult, and it probably just add to the contentiousness, or continue some level of contentiousness.
One
over
of the
years.
arguments this article pointed out, the objection that just as you're really saying here, just being compact doesn't necessarily mean fair.
No, it doesn't, because it could tilt things one way or another, and to try to get some homogeneous district is going to be difficult.
Patty, what are your thoughts?
Gerrymandering, in my mind, is an evil that we have within our country. And basically what it allows is for a politician to pick the voters that will elect him, as opposed to the voters picking the politician who represents them. If you look at some of the gerrymandered districts around the country and in some states, you will see that they are grossly altered so that it does protect the party. The recent ruling in Pennsylvania, it's something you should find, based upon the number of Democrats and Republicans, a pretty equal amount in the legislature, but it's like a 4-to-1 ratio of Republicans to Democrats. So the courts have ruled, and I don't think they're setting laws. What they've ruled is what they've done is unconstitutional. And then the court didn't say, okay, now you have to do it this way. The court said, okay, you go back and you fix it and make it constitutional. And the Supreme Court said, we're not going to hear this. It is unconstitutional. Let it go back to them and let it be decided. The Democrats are, I know, working on this. And they have a new committee called the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. And what they're doing is they're looking at gerrymandering as a problem, and how do we correct this?
This is the National Party?
It is a national, yeah. And what they've done is they've selected 12 states, including Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Georgia, Florida, Colorado, 12 states that they feel that there is a gross misrepresentation. And they're addressing those as to how do we correct the gerrymandering, not just on federal offices, but on state offices, because state offices have a great deal of importance as well, in so much as those districts are going to be drawn in 2021 by anybody that has a 4-year term. If you're elected in 2018, you will be part of that government that is drawing those lines. I know in Ohio, what they've started doing is saying, okay, we've got to target certain races and make sure that we have enough Democrats within the party. Now, of course, this is all assuming that the Democrats will come in with an even, fair distribution, and that's what you would hope for. But I know in the state of Ohio they're targeting the auditor's race, the Secretary of State's, the state legislature, the governor's race, which will be of huge importance, and there are also ballot measures, such as the one which Ron has just mentioned. This committee, you'll be interested to know, is chaired by Eric Holder, the former Attorney General, and Barack Obama is a member of the committee. And one of the things that I know Eric Holder is going to be out in Wisconsin campaigning for those. Now, again, there's a big caution on that, because you have to put some trust there that they're going to make a better situation than what we presently have. But I'll be honest with you, I don't see how it can get any worse, because we have gone to extremes. And I think, was it North Carolina or South Carolina, where they also had a ruling on the districts being gerrymandered recently, and then Pennsylvania. And if you look at the way some of these districts are drawn, the only way you do it is to affect elections.
But the districts are different for national elections than they are for
Right.
state elections, right?
Right. But and this group is targeting the local and the state elections. That's why I said the state legislatures and how those districts are even drawn.
I noticed, looking at the state map, we have I think it's District 6 that goes from somewhere around Youngstown all the way down to Portsmouth.
Yeah.
Goes all along the eastern
And you've
border.
got one up in Cleveland that takes practically the whole of the shore of Lake Erie. You even look at the district that we're in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's this sliver that, and it was moved over to pick up some of Summit County, and that was part of what Ron was talking about.
Yeah.
No, you know, Summit County is not represented by anyone living in Summit County. Summit County was a strong Democrat for the most part, with the exception of some of the suburbs. Democrat stronghold, and when they did the last redistricting, they said, okay, what we'll do is we'll split off a little bit over into Medina, Republican Medina County.
This is for the national elections.
That's for the nationals, but the state elections are happening as well. When I mentioned in Pennsylvania, the 4-1, that's the state legislature. That's not the national legislature. So they go hand in hand.
Okay, well,
I saw a picture that's of Pennsylvania.
Goofy
It was all red
and-
except for two areas were blue. Two out of the
that
entire
right?
state.
Wow.
So
How did they
And
miss
you know,
those
the thing-
two?
Well, the thing is, I don't disagree that there needs to be something done about it. But I'd be interested to know if the Democratic National Committee is going to look at the state of Illinois. I would be surprised if they are.
But they own
because,
Illinois.
Well, exactly. That's exactly my point.
Well, the thing is, they felt they couldn't target
they had
all
issues in
52.
They had
And-
issues in Wisconsin. The states that were suggested were states that the Democrats usually win, but they didn't win. And so it goes back to my original point, is that now all of a sudden redistricting is bad. And I'm not arguing that it needs to improve. It has to improve. And it can easily improve. Maybe they should have a bipartisan Republican and Democrat national committee that looks at the whole thing and presents something that everybody can get behind.
Yeah.
Because I doubt very seriously, with Eric Holder and Mr. Obama on the committee, is that I think that's kind of a non-starter when it comes to any sort of bipartisan support about solving this issue in a fair way.
They weren't picking. I'm sorry, they weren't picking just Democratic-held states. There's Texas, not a Democratic stronghold. North Carolina, Georgia, Florida. Ohio's not really a Democratic stronghold. So that's
No, that's what I'm saying is, if
they're picking both.
If the Democratic committee would come out and say, you know what, we've got an issue in Illinois, we've got an issue in some of our strongholds of redistricting, and come at it from both ends, instead of saying, well, okay, we've got a problem in Ohio because the Republicans are winning now, and they're using the rules on their behalf, and they're using them to their advantage. So we've got to change something there. That's my point.
Okay,
I
well,
wonder what are the and what criteria are they using to form these districts? What are the criteria? Are they looking at voting records to see how many people are in voted in a particular primary?
I think
I
it's
don't know
based
what
in
to. I don't know
census.
what to.
They're doing
Census
it to
information,
get a
you
particular
know.
party elected.
Right.
And that's the whole
Census.
essence. of
Well, there was
Should
a-
they use different criteria? Should we use just straight
We discussed
geographic
this one time
criteria?
in my Sunday school class, and we had a gentleman said, "Give me a pencil and a ruler, and I'll show you how to draw the districts."
yeah.
You know. But as long as, while we're waiting for the politicians to solve this problem, Patty, I would like to turn to school financing.
Okay.
All right, and I'd like to ask you a question concerning the Ohio Supreme Court decision in 1997 on school funding. They looked at the Constitution that requires, I'll give you the words, it's Section 2 of Article 6. It says, "The General Assembly shall make such provisions by taxation or otherwise as with the income arising from the school trust fund," which maybe you'll explain what that is, "will secure a thorough and efficient system of common schools throughout the state." And the Supreme Court looked at the a major financing mechanism of being property taxes and said
Right.
that that does not provide a thorough and efficient public school system. And so in 1997, the Supreme Court pretty much mandated that the legislature change things. Well, they haven't.
They refused to. They totally ignored the mandate. That was part of the DeRolf decision, which
Yes.
was named after a young man by the name of DeRolf. I think he went to, I can't think of the name of the high school right now, not someplace near, but sued on behalf of many other school districts. The problem being when it's based solely on property taxes, if you live in a community that has a lot of wealth, where there's a great deal of industry or high property values, that means there's going to be a lot more money available for the schools and the construction of the schools and the maintenance of the schools than in a poor district where there is very low tax base. And so what the state was saying and what the court said was, this is not thorough, efficient, and it's not equitable. And what they stated was, you cannot rely on property taxes alone. It should be the state that is providing this funding for this education. There was some question whether property taxes could be used at all, and then there was an update on that particular one which said, yes, property taxes can still be included. However, the state still is going to be mandated. George Voinovich, I believe, was governor at the time. And the legislature totally ignored it. They said, nope, we're not going to do it, denied it, and eventually it was just dropped.
Eventually, it went away.
It went away.
And the Supreme Court says this is unconstitutional. Legislature fix it. Why
they
aren't they
didn't.
held in contempt?
And they
Why
just
is not
didn't.
the whole legislature held in contempt and put them away and say, you guys are staying here until you fix it?
And,
I can't figure that.
Nobody would
Complete-
put any muscle into it.
No, it's
The
complete.
Supreme Court changed its tenor since that time, and they're not interested in looking at it, and they've said, no, we're not going to do anything more with it. The legislature certainly isn't. One of the side effects of the DeRolf decision is immediately after it, people in towns were saying, oh, wow, gee, we don't have to pay property taxes now so much. So what happened then is every time school district were putting tax levies on, because nothing more was coming from the state, they were putting tax levies up to support the schools. Residents were saying, well, no, the state has to do it. That's what DeRolf said, and they voted them down. So there was after that ruling, there was this rash of school levies that were defeated because people, for some reason, trusted that our legislature would do what they were ordered to do by the Supreme Court, and which they did not.
I wonder what impact the new tax code is going to have, since it eliminates being able to claim property taxes as a deduction from your taxes. Do you think that'll make a difference?
I think it could eventually. I'm not sure it's going to be a huge difference on whether people vote for school levies or not.
Yeah.
And Ohio is not one of your higher tax states, so other states have different ways to fund schools. In some states, I think Pennsylvania is set up like this. The school board can say, we need more money, so we're going to raise the taxes, and there's no vote on it.
Yeah.
Now, that makes that job on school board really important.
To your point about the unequal financing of school systems, when you look at the per student expenses,
Yes.
Wadsworth is quite an anomaly.
We're about 8,000, I think, now.
We're about a little over 8,000, where the range is anywhere from 6,000 to 20, with the
Right.
exception of Put-in Bay, which is like 39,000
Well, that's
per
because they have to
student.
fly the kids over.
You got to fly to the school.
School. Yeah. And Wadsworth has always been historically low. I kind of chuckle when, and I've heard in the past, the Wadsworth waste money. I remember it was in the 4,000s per pupil when I was still teaching. And we were one of the lowest in a 5-county area. And fortunately, that's because we have had excellent school boards, very efficient treasurers and superintendents that kept an eye on the dollar. Do I think that all superintendents should be held accountable for the amount that's spent? And do I think that there are those that are spending too much? Absolutely. And maybe we need to have some more regulation over that.
One of the things
Wadsworth is fantastic.
One of the things that has to be looked at, when you look at Wadsworth at about 8,000, Akron is a little over 10. But then you look at the percentage of the budget that's actually spent on classroom instruction. It's a higher percentage in Wadsworth. But there are other needs that have to be taken care of with students.
And that makes a big difference. That makes a big difference. So,
yeah.
which another thing when you look at a private school and you say that, well, they can do it cheaper. Well, they can do it cheaper because they don't have to provide many of the special services for
absolutely.
students that Wadsworth does as a public school. So,
on the average, though, when you look at suburban school districts, they're really around 15,000 per student.
right.
Particularly some of the pricier ones. And we're down there around 8, and I think that's an awful lot of credit to the
And
efficiency
we're a
of,
high-rated school district. It's not like this is some, fly-by-night operation here. Very
Yeah.
proud of the school district here.
yeah. But do you think we're ever going to do an overhaul of the financing mechanism?
I don't see one in the future. There seems to be no incentive for it. When it comes down to, priorities and what's the most important thing on your list, education is always at the bottom.
I know, it's expected to be free. Thank you very much. 2 good topics. I was going to try to get in 5. That would never have
Never have worked.